my chest. All right, I just got off. I do TikTok live, so I do readings on live, and I do a random free yes or no's, okay? For, I select them randomly. And I have to say, if you know that your situation is a complicated situation, okay, and you know what it is or not, it's not just a yes or a no, okay? And when you're in the TikTok lives, okay, one, there's a lot of other energy in there, okay? If you know your situation is complicated, you don't need a yes or a no. You need clarity. You need to gain clarity, okay? And so you can evaluate the situation and find a solution, or at least be able to come to a conclusion of how you want to move forward given the energy at hand. Now, tarot and even psychic readings, a lot of that stuff is in the present moment, and things can change at any time, especially if you are dealing with other people, because we as human beings make choices every day that change our path, okay? So when you say when, or you're asking about timing in tarot, and well, when is this going to happen? When is that going to happen? If it's coming to somebody's healing, there is no when. You cannot put a time on somebody's healing journey, and if you are not wanting to wait for that person, and that's something that you have to decide for yourself, okay? And the boundaries that you have to establish within yourself, okay? Especially if you break up, or if somebody, let's say somebody's in another relationship and they're like, I'm going to break it off, but I can't give to this until that, blah, blah, blah. And that's a sensitive situation. There's other people involved, and it is a very complex situation. You can, asking, well, do you know when? If you are so honed in on the when, there needs to be a reevaluation there. You're just not, it's not going to, if you're worried about, when, you've already putting pressure and negative energy on it, which is going to either repel. You have to establish your own boundaries and make your own decisions. If you know someone needs to break off their marriage and they have kids and assets and houses and whatever, that's a decision that you have to decide. Are you going to, do you want this person? Are you going to be around for them? Because that sounds like a sticky situation. So you're not just going to get a yes or a no. That's complicated. And that's where you have to establish your own boundaries, okay? This is what you're getting into moving forward. If it doesn't, maybe some of you need to be like, well, if it doesn't happen by a certain time, and I'm not seeing the actions from this person that says they're going to leave their partner or get themselves out of a situation, or whatever the case, you have choices, okay? And tarot is, even psychics are a tool of divination, okay? You have all the choices, and you need to listen to that. And if you keep seeking answers and just going for the yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, or you're asking the same yes or no question over and over and over again, you're not listening to your intuition. And if you're asking the same question and you're not doing anything to change the situation, the answers are going to be the same, unless you're waiting on another person to make a decision and you're kind of lost. It's just kind of like you have more control than you think. And I have to get that off my chest, because if you're looking for tarot to be a direct yes or no, I feel like that can be very misleading. It should be a tool of divination that you use to kind of see the energy at hand, because sometimes it gives you a different perspective. You're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And others of you know, and you're just like, well, I just want a yes or no, but you don't ask that person particularly, So, and I feel like it can be rather discouraging But you have to take the information that you have, right? And like that's why I like to do, you should get a reading if you have a more complicated situation, because that's one thing that I personally do for my clients is I walk them through ways to problem solve. And with the energy and the options and the messages that I channel in hand, and kind of give them a solution or at least a little bit of a better scope of how they can move forward and what would be the best outcome and how they can work through whatever you're trying to gain clarity on. You know, that's why I like to do life path and entrepreneur readings. And, you know, I do a lot of love readings, but inevitably, you know, you have a lot more choices. You know, if you know the situation is complex, then it's not, you know, it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray areas. And I feel like that's something that needs to, you know, because I do a lot of these readings, and I just feel like I, I feel like there should be, like, if you have a complicated solution and you're just like, well, do you know when or when and when? And like, you should just worry about like the now, because the when can be changed tomorrow, even if I give you a timeline, okay? If you were dealing with another person and that person decides, thought they were making a decision, and then something happens that alters their decision making, that timeline, it's not going to be relevant, you know? If you're waiting for someone to choose you, you should have you should be like, okay, well, if one, you shouldn't make yourself a choice on, or I don't know. I'm not going to get into all that. Always just keep in mind, like, a lot of times there's more to situations and they're a lot more complex, you know? So just book a reading, and get more clarity on how to move forward or what your possible solutions are. And if you don't get exact clarity, then take the information that you get from the reading that you got from that reader and marinate in it. Because a lot of times, if it is a complex reading and it's a complicated situation, I always tell my clients, I said, you know, because some of them are like, well, should I book another reading quickly? I'm like, well, just wait a week and let that information marinate. Because throughout the week, you're going to have little epiphanies or little things come in or little signs of whatever, especially for the more complicated readings, right? You got to let the information, because it can be a lot, marinate and see how you feel about things. And because a lot of times you'll see signs or you have things come to you that help you with the solutions and how to move forward for your highest and greatest outcome. Okay, so, and that's really important. And I think I'm just going to leave it there. I just wanted to kind of get that off my chest, because I feel like a lot of people can struggle too with just being like, it's either yes or no. We're human beings. We're very complex creatures. Okay. And sometimes you don't need a yes or no. Sometimes it's undetermined because the decision hasn't been made yet. There's a lot of other moving parts. So you don't need a yes or no. You need clarity. Okay? I love you guys. I'm just saying. I just had to get that off my chest. It's a lot, just life is complex, and yes or no's are fine, but if you're stuck in a cycle, you don't need a yes or no. You need clarity on how to move forward with the situation at hand and the energy and the moving parts that you have in front of you and what the possibilities are, so you can make the best decision for you. Okay? I love you.